Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Welcome to Side Quests, your high-octane distraction from those other podcasts. We're a pen and paper RPG audio show featuring chatter about rules and how to master them, epic world building, player investment, and interviews with the people who make the games you love. Listen in as we trade tabletop war stories, make judgment calls on odd situations, and do everything we can to give you more RPG resources than you could dream of. All from a simple side quest. I am one of your paladins of podcasting, Eli.
I am Craig, yet another paladin of podcast.
And ladies and gentlemen, paladin of podcast, Rob. And I'm excited for my library game today.
How's that going? How'd that go?
All right, so the last time we were supposed to run, I actually had to cancel, which really sucked, but I had a family member pass away, and I took a 9-hour trip to handle all of that. So with today's game, being the Saturday before Halloween, I remember telling you guys about my funny trap dungeon where it's more there to trick than treat, and it usually comes out around Halloween.
Awesome.
For youth players, I think this is going to be absolutely hilarious, easy to run, fill a 2-hour time block without a problem, and it's just 2 of them. So I hope they're going to have a good time.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Can you give an example of one of the traps?
My absolute favorite is
please.
The first room that you enter with a lever in the middle of the room. You pull the lever to open the door, and when you do so, a 10-foot radius pile of rocks drops upon you, centered on the initial lever. The lever breaks off, and it's a 6-foot staff. When you enter the next room, it is the same exact setup, only this time you now have a stick to push the lever with. And when you push the stick with the lever, a ring 10 feet from the lever falls upon you. So therefore, it's planning on you pushing the next lever with the stick.
That'll get 'em.
That's awesome. That's so fun.
It is. It's my favorite one, and it's funny because I know that we've talked about the dungeon a few times, but I use the same map. So anytime somebody writes new notes, they just become more convoluted and aged. And by this time, I think the map is actually almost a faded piece of grid paper that you can't quite make out what's on it.
Oh, that's fun. It's an artifact of its own creation. That's neat.
Absolutely. Other than that, I don't think one of them can speak Dwarven, but if they could, they'd find the trap chest with the warning is the trigger word to open it, and it's just a swarm of rats. It says rats, and it just says rats. Well, it opened. So,
oh, that's fun.
That's a lot of gotchas. That's
yeah, and I think the kids are the perfect age range. I mean, like they're 10 to 12, and I think that they'd really enjoy it. It's one of those things that knowing them for a few sessions, looking at it and thinking they really like the funny things. They like a lot of the goof around. They try to be serious, but in their hearts, they're still 10 to 12. So fart jokes and dumb traps should really help set them off for Halloween.
Honestly, that is a lot of fun role-playing games when you nothing ever matters. It's just a bunch of fart jokes.
Yeah. Some of us never grow out of it sometimes. So, Eli, you brought up a really interesting thing to talk about, and I'm really hoping you can give us some details because we all have, I believe, slightly different opinions on how to manage this topic.
It's going to be a short podcast if we all have the exact same opinion.
I got a feeling I'll be slightly on the outlying position.
Is this the balance one?
Yeah. I like how you have to ask first. Like, is
All right,
that
I'm
the
just
one?
making
Yeah,
sure.
That's the one.
Well,
we
it's
could debate wine pairings. All right. Let me check my notes.
oh man,
Wine Pairings is our Tuesday podcast.
we got a lot of white wines.
So tell us about balance. What do you think?
Okay, balance. This question was really about should an RPG be balanced? Should the tabletop RPG as a rule system, how balanced should it be? And I think it kind of falls into two different categories personally. Like I think that there's
Hold
the
on.
balance of how the rules are
Hold up.
and the
When you
balance
say
of the
balance,
table.
when you say balance, what do you mean?
I got the same question.
I think balance between different classes or basically between the players. When you have 6 different characters out at the table, how balanced are they against each other?
If
And
you had
how
to-
well an RPG manages creating that. Like, do you have 6 characters who are, if we use steel challenge rating, that are exactly challenge rating 1? Or do you have a variance where you've got one character who's probably hits a 2 and
Sorry, I think
One
we
that's
still
nothing.
run into this problem even now as we explain it. If you had to describe what this meant without using the word balance, how would you describe it? Are we talking about the ability to affect the game world? Are we talking about a pure combat assessment? What is it? What does this mean to you?
a lot of the times it is expressed in combat stats essentially or combat value because a lot of the games that we end up playing are so all the rules are based around combat and there's not a lot of social rule structure. So I do think that combat is the biggest expression of quote unquote power. But I do think a better way would probably be measuring how often their dice succeed.
I'd like to take a crack at defining part of this.
Yeah, go for it.
To kind of help give us a framework here. Without using the word balance, I would say how level of a playing field each character is in the game world based on the mechanics of the specific rule set.
How level each character is on the playing field given the mechanics of the specific rule set. Okay, so tell me
So-
more. What do you think? What are you thinking about?
Well, we'll use the challenge rating system to equate for a moment. Right now, only looking at players. If I don't like to use 1 because it's so base. If that makes sense. I mean, everybody starts base. So if we use something like a challenge rating of 10 and considering only our players should have approximately the same amount of hit die and not necessarily the same die, but the same amount of hit die. And inside that challenge rating, we'll see things such as specialized powers or abilities that lend to the character in class, if it's a class system, or abilities if it's a classless system based on abilities. Which means that you will see trade-offs for more power, but a lower hit point value to AC ratio in comparison versus something like a melee class that will deal significantly less damage to fireball, for example. But their armor and hit points allow for that soaking of damage. I really think that's what balance tends to mean to a majority of people. If I'm trying to put it into words without using balance, which becomes difficult.
I think that this is so I always end up misquoting this, and I'm gonna make myself look a bit of a fool for not being able to name the origin. But essentially, there's this idea that you're limited in the ideas that you can have based on the language that you speak. Such that if your language does not have the words for a certain concept, then you literally can't think about them. And I'm sure somebody's gone and disproven that 10 times in some way, but it's a useful idea. And I think that to discuss balance in a role-playing game presupposes that sort of combat is the end-all be-all, or in a different kind of what I think of as a mistake, that if we can make people roughly equivalent in a combat scenario, then that is balance, but that's not all that happens in the game. If somebody showed up and there was like, well, we're going to judge people on their combat ability, but then somebody shows up and says, well, okay, we're playing Pathfinder. I made a character who's got a diplomacy modifier of plus 40. I can talk my way out of just about anything based on what the rules say. Does that make them more or less powerful than a fighter who can cleave the Tarrasque in two with a single blow from his greatsword?
Can I answer?
Yeah. What's up?
In that specific scenario, I would say that they're near equally as powerful. Because looking at the idea of balance, we have to take into consideration the full scope of the game, which includes social interactions. And sometimes the character who can talk themselves in and out of any form of trouble is just as rewarding as that of the fighter who can cleave the Tarrasque in two hits.
Sure, as long as you're still resolving this stuff with dice rolls. Because I think that this question also becomes sort of fraught, and gets back to the, like, how do you discuss ideas you don't necessarily have words for if you start considering games where combat is not, even getting into combat is considered a failure state. It's a bit of an extreme opinion, but in some of the more harsher, high lethality OSR style games, it's almost a meme at this point. But if they say, oh, if you're fighting, you are already losing. The idea being that, oh, everyone's so fragile that if you haven't sprung an ambush, if you haven't resolved it before you even roll initiative, like, you're already in trouble. But games like that also tend not to have a skill system for something like, oh, I'd like to convince them and I'll roll my diplomacy. The GM is encouraged to say, well, what do you say to them? That's the only thing that's going to determine whether you've convinced them or not. I think that the question of balance is vastly different depending on what the game is trying to do. And it's a lot easier to have that answer if you end up in a room where like Pathfinder, where the game is about, or D&D 5th edition, where the game is about kicking in monsters' teeth and taking their stuff. But if there's, what is balance in a game like Blades in the Dark, or like Unknown Armies or something like that? How do you have that conversation?
So one way I like to think about balance is, like, if you consider you consider as many different aspects of the game as you want, how often is your character useful and successful in those situations? So taking like combat, social situations, and then kind of maybe the nebulous third axis of like skill challenges.
Well, you're talking about 3 pillars here. You've got combat, social, and the exploration stuff.
Yeah, so I like to think of balance as how, like, if you took the average of like how efficient you are in those 3 categories.
Your ratio of success to failure in your attempts?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like maybe a fighter probably has, like 90% combat and 5% sprinkled across, and you average out to 33%. Like, how do those percentages compare to everyone at your table? I think that's how I like to try to think about balance. Like, you can think of the fighter might be balanced against the mage or the thief, who is very efficient in skill situations.
So I can see where that's coming from, but I guess when looking at resolution via dice roll, and the random die roll doesn't always allow for good balance. To put it, I mean, I've had nights where I've rolled nothing but 1s and 2s, 4 or 5 hours, all 1s or 2s, nonstop. I've had other nights where I roll mid, but does that mean that on the nights that I'm rolling less, the game is less balanced in this aspect?
I don't think so. I think that you can't really. I mean, the whole point of your dice is that they're randomly generating numbers for you. The question, I think, is what is the goal of balance? Is it an enjoyable outcome? Or separately, is it a victory on the part of the character and therefore the player? Because those will produce very different answers. We were just talking about this earlier before we started recording, but in a game where everyone wins every challenge, it's boring. And I would say that that's not a successful RPG unless everyone showed up and said, we are here for a power fantasy and we just want to win. Like, if that's your goal, great, you succeeded. So I don't think that's actually what the idea of balance in a game system addresses. Not exactly a success or failure ratio, but I think it's more like does everyone at the table have a roughly equal chance of participating in the game in a meaningful way? What do you think about that?
I think that's fair, but at the same time, I think that leaves a lot to individual play style, because full character sheet or empty character sheet, everybody has the same opportunity to step up. But if they're not the type of person to present themselves at the table, if they're just there to roll dice, I think by that means it's not quite meeting the same definition of balance.
I don't think there's a rule set that you could put in front of somebody, though, that's going to convince somebody who's feeling, quiet or is generally more introverted to necessarily come out of that shell based on the mechanics of the game that they're playing. You can encourage them, but you can't compel them. So I just don't think that enters into part of the discussion.
I'm just saying that based on everybody having the opportunity to succeed 1%, it's going to, I guess, in my opinion, it would depend on their ability to present more than just roll die. Granted, some people only have fun, just they come to roll die and leave. So, I mean, if it's that player, sure. I don't know, this is tough, Eli.
Yeah, there's definitely a few ideas out there that I had. I was approaching it from a completely different direction, which is fascinating to hear.
I rained on your parade. I'm sorry. What? When you say completely different direction, what do you mean?
Oh, I was just thinking of different. Like I was trying to think of different systems that I thought were somewhat balanced or unbalanced, and I was thinking about how easily different rule sets try to encourage player success, and how I was just trying to think of different rule sets that how construction of a character can influence your chance of being successful at the table.
I spilled my bucket of philosophy all over your nice cake. I'm sorry. What
was the? It was a beautiful cake. What was the
specific example you had in mind?
I was just thinking as probably an unbalanced system. I was thinking of I was thinking that very crunchy systems would be considered very unbalanced because you can create characters with completely wide ranges of chances of success at the table. While I feel like a lot, I guess, simpler or more narrative systems end up not influencing the chances of player success, and then it's just all on the players themselves.
So I think that most systems tend to find a way to self-balance at the table. You have really crunchy systems, Pathfinder, D&D, full of rules. And you get to a point where we look at 3.5, and that's kind of like the crenellation of this rule system. And they were off the rails, essentially. People say that you're massively overpowered, and your power scale continuously moves forward exponentially, with no real end in sight. I mean, you could push it to epic levels, 20th and higher, etc. But at the same time, things scaled with you to a degree where your power level or challenge ratings or level in general didn't really matter much. I mean, you scaled at the same rate. I think in those cases, it's DM's ability to balance between appropriate challenges, social encounters, combat encounters, exploration encounters, etc. It falls on the DM. Whereas games that are powered by the apocalypse, for example, Eli, you've mentioned really narrative games. These games in particular have no self-balancing mechanic, so it's self-balanced via party.
What do you mean by that, self-balance for your party?
Um, I guess easiest way to think about is we'll take my problem player that we had talked about before the episode. His personality offsets the table in a negative way. A self-balancing party would be able to correct that naturally through roleplay, social atmosphere, table function comes to mind, but that's not the right word. But I'm going to use function. Through the way the table functions, they should be able to essentially balance, agree, and become more of a singular unit versus individual spokes.
So you don't care what the system gives you. You want the players' personalities to balance each other out at the table.
If it's a less die roll based game,
okay,
is how I would do that one.
So I have kind of a follow-up question. What do you two think about randomly generated, like games where you randomly generate your character? Is a game where where every player like randomly generates their character, maybe like Traveler, for example, is that game balanced?
So I think when you're talking about balance for a game like Traveler, which uses a life path generation system, where when the player shows up, they're not so much creating their character based on an idea they had previously, but discovering who the character is as they go through the process of character creation. That game is not a game that you are playing with the idea that success at the table is one where you pay off your loan that has your ship and you triumph and become a galactic governor and accrue vast wealth. Like you could do these things in the process of portraying the character. But if you had if you ended up making a character and they went through a series of misadventures and they gained vast fortunes and lost them in the throw of the dice, and they had allies and enemies, and the enemies got the better of them most of the time, but they got a few good licks in the end they ended up retiring less rich than they thought they might deserve, but you told a good story at the end of it, even if the character didn't come out completely on top. Did you win or lose that game? And I think to answer my own question, I think that for a game like that, balance isn't relevant. I think that it's a wrong question, because if the difference between victory and loss in a game like this is not the same thing as success or failure. You played the game successfully because you got a good experience, a good story, not in the sense of a narrative pre-constructed idea, but you played to find out what would happen to your character and reacted in the moment to each one. And it doesn't actually matter if your laser gun does the right amount of damage along the way. If you came into an encounter where, okay, well, I need to figure out a way to get through this blockade to get off the planet to so-and-so and so-and-so, like, you dealt with the situation as it was in the moment. And so I feel like a question of balance just doesn't enter into the conversation at all, so much as a question of verisimilitude. Can you act in this world in a way that makes sense? Can you act on the things that the GM has presented to you in a way that's consistent? Does that make sense? I feel like it's just sort of a categorically inapplicable way to talk about it.
I understand what you're saying. I think it makes sense, but I've got a hard time relating it to balance.
Well, I think he hit on the biggest topic, and it was actually that this was an entirely bait topic, and that balance does not matter as long as your players all are on the same page, be it a random character generation or they're all creating characters of similar, of similar, like in similar vein, similar.
Eli, have you bamboozled us? Was this your plan the entire time?
Maybe a little bit.
Have we been played for fools?
Not fair. Not fair.
No,
It's good. It's good though.
Yeah, I don't think balance matters in a game system as long as your table is balanced.
God damn it! I think I figured it out.
You figured it out. What's up?
All right. So, as I'm listening and I'm trying to formulate general responses or other well-developed thoughts in the brief period of time, I think the idea of balance is generally confused among a lot of people with overpowered.
I think that is common in the parlance, yeah.
Which is it. So when you hear about a lot of people discussing the idea of balance, yes, it comes down to the idea of combat. We've discussed that briefly. We've touched on that because people don't want out of balance. They don't want one player to take overshine. They don't want them to be top tier 100% of the time, Craig, like you've said repeatedly, especially tonight before the podcast, during, etc. So that idea overpowered. They don't want them to be overshadowing. They don't want them to be taking over the party, and not necessarily in the idea of what's it called? Main character trope or main character syndrome.
So balance is defined by the lack of a presence of someone who's overpowered, defining it by the negation.
I think as we're discussing this, that's the closest.
Let me try
push.
something else here. I think when I hear what you're saying, what it seems to me is that it's you are discussing the idea of a balanced game as one that may or may not have variance in what the players can accomplish, but that variance is fairly constrained. If you want to put it on a number scale, 0 to 10, a game feels balanced to the players if the average is pegged at 5 and they can expect that everyone in the group is going to be plus or minus 1 or 2 on that scale. And if the variance is huge and some people could be, 3 or 4 points higher on that, and that faculty of getting there is like, oh, well, did you spend extra time reading the books? Well, you're going to be more powerful. That's where it starts to feel unbalanced. Does that represent what you're describing?
Truthfully, I'm not sure, because personally, my opinion comes down to in a balanced game, my player should have a fair amount of successes and failures that are roughly equal. Again, have a good time, but they should fail and succeed about enough without being a drag.
Yeah, so everyone is within that same area. No one stands out. No one is exceptionally standing out or exceptionally below.
If the story calls for it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I end up really in a position of outlier opinion, because I don't think any game can be out of balance. I just believe out of balance is possible.
I think we're actually describing 3 different things here.
I agree.
No, I do. I think
of course we are.
Each one of us is we're trying to circle the same idea, but Rob, I think you're describing the idea of balance as part of that social contract stuff that we talked about before. That a balance in the sense of a group's social experience in relation to each other and the GM. And Eli, I think. Oh no, am I off?
How I feel personally, yes. How I may be describing unintentionally, maybe not.
Oh, I have not unlocked the ability to read your mind over TCP/IP yet, but
not yet.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I don't want to hog this. Just in general, like I said, I don't think things can be overpowered. I don't think that it's determined by the players. I don't think it's determined by the dice. I think things, yes, social construct, as you'd mentioned, balanced naturally based on the table. But I think it's in most games, especially crunchy based games, it's in the rules and the hands of the DM. The DM has every absolute resource possible to keep their players engaged, challenged, and in a position of success or struggle based on either their skill level, improv level, or knowledge of rules. That entire toolkit allows them to create any level of playability for the players. And that's why I don't think things can be out of balance in a mechanical sense. But I do think there's a social contract table sense. I'm just way less focused on that one, except for this game that I'm currently doing. First time ever.
Okay. It does still seem to be like there's a strong social component to the way that you're thinking about balance, and still the interpersonal interactions of the players and the GM and the milieu that the game presents.
Maybe.
But in comparison, Eli, I think that you've been talking about, or at least from your original conception of it, the idea of like character builds and the actual mechanics and that kind of stuff. And whereas when I heard balance, I heard it in the sense of like the fundamental like philosophy of like what does it mean to play this game? What kind of challenges are going to be presented? Is this the kind of game where one of the ways this is talked about is the difference between combat as a sport versus combat as warfare. Where, in some games, generally the stuff that you see from, year 2000 up to about 2018 or so, 2017, is stuff where, there are challenge ratings. Like, it is an appropriate challenge rating of 5 or whatever for a 5th level party. And if you veer outside of that, then it becomes an unbalanced encounter. And the party should expect that kind of thing. Versus other games that say, the party is 1st level or 2nd level. There is an entire nest of 8 hit die griffins in this room. Of course they can't fight them. They would be foolish to do so. But it is clear that they are griffins, and it's up to the party to figure out, well, what do we do about that? And it's just two fundamentally different philosophies for what kind of game is being played, what is an appropriate thing to put in that game.
In that scenario, though, I think that both end up, as you mentioned, my descriptor of the social aspect, the griffins, the table has to determine that, we're not going to fuck with that because we're just going to get slaughtered. The table has to learn. They have to balance that out. They can't just go kill everything because they don't want to die. That is that aspect that I think about when I say, the table does social construct to self-balance.
There's still like a meta element there, though. Like if I'm playing, a game of Pathfinder, or I'm playing a game of D&D 5e or whatever, and I've read the books, and I know that like the GM is supposed to put challenges in front of us that are equivalent to, that are appropriate for our power level. And if I'm playing that game and I have that expectation and nobody has said anything otherwise, or nobody has sort of said, hey, this game is going to have, out of band challenges, because the game is fundamentally a heroic fantasy experience. It would be weird if I had walked in and it turns out that the genre that we were playing was like Game of Thrones rather than Lord of the Rings to really slice it fine.
I get it now, because I don't, when I look at it, I don't look at it like we should be able to win. I'm like, shit, there are things that we're going to come across that we will not win, that we have got to run away from. There are going to be encounters that the only option for success is to avoid, run away, hide, fight another day.
Oh, cool, my dinner arrived. Great.
It's so weird because our time difference. You're like, dinner's great. I'm like, it's 10:30 at night.
I do have a friend who will start cooking dinner at like 9:45 at night. I don't know why he does it. But he like not small things either. He'll be like, great, time to be the chef. Bruno, my man, what are you doing?
My mom always thought I was on drugs when I did that. I was just hungry.
Big meals are for the morning and lunch.
Nice.
The point I was trying to make is, given that setup, if you're playing this game where you've got the meta context of, my expectation is that my heroic encounters will be challenging but appropriate difficulties, and you've got a DM who suddenly drops that nest of 8 full-grown griffins on them, and that's just way out of band, and the players get their asses kicked. TPK, everyone's dead. Would they be justified to be pissed off about that?
No.
They would not be justified to be pissed off about that.
No, they could have chosen not to attack the griffins.
Even given the premise that every fight, perhaps up to that point, had been like, oh, yeah, no, we're going to fight like an orc warband, and they're going to be a tough but fair challenge.
I don't know. I mean, let's put it in real terms. Craig, would you go attack an orangutan?
That depends. Am I a wizard?
No, you're Craig.
Oh, well, no, obviously not. But if I knew that I could throw fireballs, I might consider that differently.
But what I'm saying is, I mean, you know your abilities as Craig. You would know your abilities as a character. And if you've seen something that just even looked remotely out of scale, you'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that.
Can you pick a meaner animal for me to fight, theoretically? I like
orangutans.
Orangutans when they're grumpy?
Yeah.
They'll rip your arms off.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. But, like, can you, like...
They'll beat you with it.
Or wait, a horde of hamsters with knives strapped to their backs.
No, I might be able to take that one.
Okay.
Alluding.
Oh, no.
Absolutely
Look,
reinforcing
how about this? How about
Craig's
this? A cassowary. That is a hateful bird.
Now, could there be two birds if you have one stone?
Oh my god. Don't public service announcement, don't fight a cassowary. It's important. We're not joking about this.
Are they very balanced?
Against a human? No, they're terribly overpowered. They can one-shot you, man. I don't mess with cassowaries. I'm sorry. Please continue.
God damn it! That's the thing. I don't like birds, so I would be dumb enough to probably attack a bird, regardless.
Rob, please do not fight a cassowary, even given the opportunity.
Here I am. Like fundamentally, I'm like, Craig is making great points, and I agree, but I'm not sure if I'm 100% in his court. And then I turn around and I literally just emulate what Craig's talking about. Like, you think you might be able to do it. I mean, can you blame them? Now, I would only be mad at myself if I decided to attack a bird that can just one-shot me. I can't blame Craig for telling me not to. So in a party, if we decide to attack a nest full of griffins because the DM put them there, it is my dumb fault for saying, yeah, we're going to roast these guys. Knowing full well there's 8 of them, maybe 5 of us. On a
this wasn't
good day.
An allegory. That was actually unplanned. So
yeah,
it was perfect. And real Rob would take on the bird.
Did you
play Rob?
Did you Google what a cassowary looks like?
I vaguely remember, and if I remember, every time I spell it wrong, so I get some stupid cartoon bird.
I think it's Cassowary.
Oh, that's just straight up a
That's a
evil
dinosaur.
turkey.
It's a dinosaur.
It's a dinosaur. Yep.
Yeah, it reminds me of an ostrich.
Yeah, no, don't. Anyway, I'm glad we had this section of the episode.
Rob will fight any bird you give them.
Once. He'll fight any bird once.
It's a bird. I cannot be that far off to let me prepare.
It's a shame that fighting a bird is bad podcasting content.
When you again, please do not fight a cass. Did you look when you looked at this picture of this bird? Did you see a picture of its feet?
You're just like, I'd fight that.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
I looked at him. My first thought was, man, my grandma had water in her ankles. They look about the same.
Yeah, but the talons, man.
Sure, but I'm like, if I just have a big enough sword.
Whoa. Hey, wait a minute.
Like, am I supposed to duke this thing out like Slugfest?
I mean, are you walking around with like a Zweihunter as part of your EDC? Like, what is?
Why not? I mean,
Eli's going off screen to get his axe. No, okay, he's got the gladius. The gladius. Okay.
I'm just saying, I mean, if I gotta stand out there and we're gonna Slugfest, I mean, this bird's gonna tear me up. But yeah, I wouldn't just go attack it with my fist. I wouldn't punch just about any animal with a fist. That'd be stupid. Like, humans are the squishiest mammals.
We're really outgunned. Outgunned here.
Yeah, the only advantage that we have evolutionarily is the fact that we can kill people or animals or monsters from a distance, like a great distance. Hence why we're at the top.
Are you aware of the Great Emu War?
I think I've read about it because it sounded ridiculous, but
Australia lost a war against emus. I'm just saying, as you're preparing to fight birds, like, learn from our forebears here. They had machine guns, and it didn't work out in their favor. I'm not making this up. You should look this up. Great Emu War.
But they didn't have Rob's sword.
That's
all I'm saying.
That's just dumb stuff I've actually. No, I'm just. I don't like birds, man. So I don't like birds or boats. So maybe I'll start with a boat.
The podcast lore is expanding here. I appreciate this. Someone has this in the wiki.
I agree.
Hilarious.
I also dislike boats, but I have played RPGs on a boat, on a cruise ship. So.
Have you?
Was that like an organized RPG cruise, or did you just happen to run a game on a cruise?
It just happened to be a game on a cruise. My box of D&D, I accidentally brought like a metal case that had plastic dice in it. So my entire suitcase of D&D books and stuff got confiscated by their security because they thought I was bringing on like plastic explosives. I was like sitting there, I was like, man, where's all my D&D stuff? What happened? Did I not make it through security? And sure enough,
I once got flagged for bringing chainmail through the scanner at the airport, and they pulled me aside and they said, so I had a chainmail shirt in my luggage. This is I do not remember why, but it was definitely a thing that I had with me.
I initially thought you were wearing it, by the way.
Right now? No, not
just when you walk
through
security.
Oh man, let me tell you about felonies that get exacerbated by wearing body armor when you commit them. So
you were committing felonies at the airport, and your luggage got flagged.
No, I have never committed a felony, sir. I have never committed a felony. Do I need to call my lawyer? Do I need to call my lawyer? She's in the other room. No, my point is, I got pulled out of the security line, and they said, "Sir, are you carrying human remains?"
Why that particular question?
So it turns out that a balled up stainless steel shark mail shirt looks exactly like an urn full of human ashes on the scanner.
Oh.
A very dense agglomeration. They're like, okay, you can't do that. You have to tell us if you're carrying a person in your luggage or a former person. Anyway, pro tip, don't do that.
Hold on, Craig. We have a cliffhanger here. When you told them it was chainmail, did they verify?
Oh yeah, no, they were like,
what was their response?
They only had more questions. They're like, wait, why do you have chainmail? And
yeah,
I think
that's actually the story I'm interested in. Not why you had chainmail, just what happened with the TSA after they found out it was only chainmail.
Oh, I took it out. I put it on. They were like, "Oh, that's really cool." I wish I had been more of a smartass about it, but we had to get somewhere, and I wasn't traveling alone.
Fair enough.
When I brought that sword, I bought it in Spain, and I brought it through customs.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh yeah, let's see it." And the guy was like, "This is pretty cool. Hey." And he like called over all the other agents.
Over everybody else.
They're like, check this out. They're like, I'm sitting there waiting to get through customs, and they're all like swinging the sword around.
Oh my
checking it out. It was awesome.
You give anybody a sword, and that's so. I don't have as exciting of a story, but I was coming back up from a cross country trip from down south from Florida, and my buddies and I stopped by a flea market. We picked up some swords because, we were young teens. They're cool. They were at a flea market. Why not? And on the drive back, because we're from the Midwest, we drive everywhere. Like, we don't fly. I don't know why. Anyhow, we get stopped in the mountains of one of the Carolinas because my buddy's deciding that it's okay to do 100 some miles an hour in a 55. And he says, "Do you guys have any weapons in the vehicle?" Youngest out of all of our friends, one of our friends says, "Yeah, we got some swords in the back," which we had put at the bottom of the trunk, underneath all of our luggage. And the officer made us open the trunk and pulled absolutely everything out just to look at them. And his response was, "Oh, those are cool. You shouldn't be speeding with weapons." Wrote my buddy a ticket, $365. Did not take him to jail, and made us put all of our shit back in the trunk at 6 a.m. in the morning.
You were in the middle of the mountains.
It was freezing cold.
Oh no.
It sucked. That's when somebody says you have weapons, I'm just nope. If that's just a general question, I do not have a weapon.
I can't endorse this, but I also don't endorse talking to the cops at all. So
fair. They also don't like it when you say that your left and right arms are the biggest guns you own. They don't joke around with that.
These guns.
Yeah. Oh,
Someday,
man.
guys, I may tell you the story of how I almost went to a Swiss prison. Travel's fun.
Well.
I'm interested. I'm going to bookmark this so we'll remember.
So when he said he hasn't ever committed a felony, he meant in the U.S.
No.
Oh.
I have never committed a felony, gentlemen.
Fair enough. Looking at the time, though, we're going to go on a different side quest if we keep this up. So we're hitting our mark. Why don't we put a pin in this here? We'll hear your story about, you said Swiss prison?
I don't know if well,
Not
maybe,
next time,
maybe
but it's later.
Someday, maybe I'll tell that story of how I almost went to Swiss prison.
Please do not commit any felonies.
Don't fight any birds. Don't commit any felonies, friends. Thanks for listening.
Ruins my weekend. So you guys have a wonderful weekend. Check us out on Facebook at Epic Table Games or online epictablegames.com, and please start sending us voice messages through Spotify. We ramble on. We need your guys' input.
You think it's a felony to fight a bird?
Certain birds.
Yeah.
It depends on if he's breaking into the zoo to do it.
God, you could stack some. All right. Next time.
We've already ended the episode. It's migrator. It's any bird that migrates across North America. Illegal to own and fight. Bye, guys.
You have to find it in the wild.